can start the meeting now. Good morning, everybody. Right on time at 11 o'clock. Here we are. My name is Vanessa MacDonald. I'm the Communications Coordinator of the Central Bank of Malta, and we're really thrilled to have you all join us for this lecture. Today we are going to be listening to a lecture on the Bibliotheca. It's entitled An Architectural Jewel Box, commemorating the 225th anniversary of the completion of Malta's Bibliotheca. The building was actually one of the very last to be built by the Order of St. John, and it was completed in 1796. As anybody who has been to Valletta would know, it today houses the National Library of Malta, which has a fantastic collection of published works about the Maltese island, but it also has some very interesting collections on archives, actually, which are significant even on a European level, especially when it comes to the Order of the Knights of St. John. To deliver that lecture, we have University of Malta Associate Professor William Zammit. However, I think it's very important to start off with why. What is the connection between the Central Bank of Malta and the Bibliotheca? Well, for the last year, the Communications Department has been tying in with the Malta Coin Centre, which issues our numismatic collections. And in a few weeks' time, the Central Bank of Malta or the Malta Coin Centre will be issuing a silver numismatic coin depicting the Bibliotheca. So, without further ado, I'll just quickly go through a few housekeeping rules. Could we ask everybody to please mute their microphone, except for the chief officer that I will introduce soon, and obviously the presenter. And it also is much less distracting, especially when there's a PowerPoint on screen, to have your videos turned off. We will invite you to ask questions afterwards, and I'll give you some more information about this shortly. But if you could turn off your videos, it does make it much easier to follow the person who is actually speaking at the time. So, can I introduce Desmond Gatt, who is the Chief Officer at the Bank for Banking and Currency, and he will explain to you a little bit about our numismatic issues. Desmond, over to you.
Thanks, Vanessa. So I will give a brief overview of what we've done this year and what we will be doing at MCC and the bank in general. We try to commemorate events, social or otherwise, that happened in Malta, and now we are also branching out in commemorating other events as well at the European level, since we're part of a larger community now. What we've done this year, I think I will be sharing a presentation. Did I manage to do that, Vanessa?
I'm not seeing it. There it is, yes.
Okay, so I stopped sharing once you told me no. So
no, it was there, it was there.
Okay, so what we've done this year, we've issued a number of coins. We're very pleased that the collection that we have this year is quite extensive. The first coin that we issued was both in gold and silver, and it commemorates Durer. We have some works, some fantastic works in Malta, and it is the first coin that you see at the top. The Bibliotheca coin is the second one. It is also something which we are very proud of. The artistic work that we've commissioned from Noah Karyan Basin is quite good, not good. It's excellent actually, and the building itself lends itself to being represented on a coin. It's the second coin. It will be available for sale on the 21st of July, we hope, because they went in Holland has quite an extensive number of projects from us, but we hope they will make it available by the 21st of July. The third coin is still at the pre-production stage. It's still works in progress from the artistic point of view. Generally, it takes us 6 months to come up with a design, and as you can see, our thinking about the self-government is represented more allegorically, let's say, and we have included the work as it stands today. It could be a little bit different when it is eventually issued, because that is the first artwork that we have from our art. Again, it's Noel Gallia Basin. This year, although we had not planned for it, and obviously nobody planned for something of the sort. We issued a coin to commemorate Prince Philip. The portrait that you are seeing here is actually taken from a photograph um, from the time that he was in Malta. So the age of the person is around about the age when he was here in Malta in the 50s. So we make sure that we commemorated him as well because he had quite an extensive collection. We're doing a joint project with the junior college as well. They wanted to commemorate their 25th year. We've done a coin with them commemorating the 25 years of the junior college. I was very happy to do it because I am one of the product of that college. So I had also a little bit of a personal interest there. And this year we're doing another project with the Commonwealth Mint. This is the first year that we've done project with other mints across Europe. And the Commonwealth Mint is actually a British mint, a private mint. And we're going to issue a coin with them in these formats. Most of the coins are collector coins, but we will also be issuing a silver coin, a one-ounce silver coin, which is bullion standard, so it will be very near the price of silver for the persons who want actually to have silver coins as a form of savings, let's say. Of note as well, we will be also be issuing our first 1 kilogram coin, which is quite a hefty coin, let's say. But we know it's going to sell well as well. This is another idea that we're developing. The coin at the top, because it is a coin, it is a legal tender, is in full color print, and that coin is actually 40 centimeters, which is about half a meter by 28 centimeters. It's one of the larger coins. We're doing it very limited edition, so there will be 100 of that, but it is also, beyond being a coin, it is also a picture, and it depicts something which we are very proud of and which we nearly lost, but we had recovered some time ago, let's say. The coin as well then will be reproduced on more standard formats, which are the gold coin and the silver coin. And again, I think you will realize that the topmost coin is again of quite an extensive weight because it is 1.5 kilograms in weight, which is quite again a substantial amount of silver. We are doing also a joint product with a Polish mint. They specialized in high relief coins. This coin is almost a work of art because the one at the top, which is the ultra high relief, is 4 millimeters in relief. It's not 4 millimeters the coin; it's the relief itself that is 4 millimeters, and that's quite an extensive relief. It will actually be a first for us because we've never done coins with such technical features, and we hope it goes down well with collectors as well. This year we are going to issue 2 euro coins as well. One of them you see second from the bottom is going to commemorate our health system or our health workers. I think they've been very much helpful over the last 14 months. They've been helping society move on from the problems that we've been facing from a health perspective. And we're very proud to do something to commemorate their work. I think it's a huge social event that we are now at the point where we are feeling a little bit less worried, let's say, or more happy about the situation. We hope that this continues and our economy picks up again. And the last, but not least, is the Tashin Temples coin. We've been commemorating our temples. I think it's something to be proud of, whereas other mints across Europe would show monasteries or monuments that are at most 1,000 years old. We can boast of monuments which are 5,000 years or more old, which is something that we can really boast of. We thought about doing the Bibliotheca as we believe that knowledge is very much part of what we need for our economy to move on. As you realize, books have for quite an extensive number of years been the primary the prime methodology for people to communicate knowledge. And knowledge in general forms the basis also of economies as well. It is the knowledge that allows economies to function, for people to produce products, or for ideas to be moved forward. So I would like to invite now Professor William Zammit, who knows much more about the Bibliotheca than I do, and I'm all ears to hear what he has to say about the Bibliotheca. William, it's up to you now.
I'll just quickly introduce Professor Zammit before he takes over, while perhaps you can prepare your PowerPoint presentation, Profs. He has a PhD in history, and he headed the Department of Library Information and Archive Sciences at the University of Malta for over a decade. He's currently involved in a number of research projects. His main areas of academic interest include the mechanisms of early modern communication, print history, censorship, and other forms of control, as well as the bibliographic control of Melitensia. Again, I remind you that a recording is being taken of this, and it will be available on the Central Bank of Malta website a few days later for all of those who are unable to follow it live. So please let other people know if they were not able to attend in person. Don't forget that there will be time for questions at the end of the lecture. You may either post your questions in the chat as part of Teams, or just use the raise hands function, which you'll find on your screen as well, and I will be able to take on as many questions as possible afterwards. Thank you very much. Profs, over to you. Thank you. We were seeing it for a moment there, Prof. It's now disappeared. Would you like to try it again? And we could hear you as well.
Yes. I'm working on it.
Let us know if you have any problems.
Is it okay now, Vanessa?
There it is. That's fine, and we can hear you loud and clear.
Okay,
over to
thanks.
you. Take it away.
Oh, so good morning, everyone. I would like to start first by thanking you, Vanessa, for your introduction, as well as to Jasmine for his very insightful information about the coinage to be issued by the Central Bank. As we all know, the Central Bank has a very long history of issuing high-quality coinage, so it's an added feather in our national cap, I would say. Right, I shall be talking about our National Library, historically known as the Bibliotheca, mostly from a historical perspective. However, we shall also continue this story up till practically our own time. Okay, so essentially, I shall be tackling 4 aspects pertaining to the Bibliotheca, pertaining to our National Library. I shall be starting with its actual foundation, its setting up, and also the building, the building which it presently occupies. It has occupied since quite some 1796, essentially. Then we'll pass on to the actual collections. I decided to name this lecture a jewel box in the sense that not only is the building itself one of the most impressive, one of the most important structures that we have in our capital, but of course, much important as well are the collections, the impressive collections that are housed, hence the jewels, that are housed within the building itself. The third part will concentrate upon the eventual transition from Bibliotheca Pubblica to National Library, essentially the status of National Library that was granted to our Bibliotheca, and the functions, particularly legal deposit obligations, that go with this function as a national library, as against a public lending library. Finally, I would like to share with you some what I refer to as lesser known treasures from the collection. We know, most of us know something about the archives, know something about the Melitensia and the collection. However, the richness of the collection goes beyond that. and I shall just give you some tastes about these lesser-known items treasured in our collection. Okay, so starting with the actual foundation, well, often we read that the first idea of having a library by the order of St. John goes back quite some time, goes back actually to 1555, when the order set this rule that any member of the order who passed away, his books were to be taken over to set up a library. Essentially, it was the same idea that came to fruition about 200 and more years later. However, this decree of 1555, although it was actually passed, does not seem to have actually resulted in the setting up of a library. There was a library attached to the conventual church of St. John. It was known as the Bibliotheca San Giovanni. However, this enactment of 1555 remained more or less a dead letter. It's important in the sense that, you know, it's the first reference towards an attempt, a wish to set up a library, a collection. The real motivation for the present collection, for the setting up of our Bibliotheca, came up much later in 1760 on the initiative of the French knight, the Ballet-de-Tencin. Ballet-de-Tencin had his own library, has his own impressive collection. He also managed to acquire another large library, that of the Spanish Cardinal Portocarrero, who was also a knight, was also a member of the order. When Portocarrero died, de Tencin bought that library. And so he united both collections, which he subsequently donated to the Order of St. John. So these two collections actually form the nucleus to this day of our National Library collection. Much of this material still exists. These two collections contained printed books, they contained manuscripts, they contained maps. The vast majority of this material still survives and forms, you know, the pride, so to speak, of our national collection. What you're seeing here is a portrait of Cardinal Portocarrero, a portrait that was painted by the renowned French artist Favre, who was active in Malta, of course, as you would know. So we have these two founders whose collections set up the Bibliotheca. Portocarrero's books were brought over from Rome to Malta because his collection was actually in Rome, and then the Tencin needed the services of a person, you know, a scholarly individual, to actually organize and actually set up the Bibliotheca. And his choice fell to our honor, certainly, on a Maltese, actually a Gozzitan, the renowned Agius de Soldanis. And Agius de Soldanis was appointed by the Tencin as librarian. De Soldanis retained that post up till his death in 1770. And we owe much to de Soldanis, we owe much to de Soldanis on various aspects, as a historian, as a linguist. Also, in this context, as our first librarian. It was de Soldanis who organized the collection. It was de Soldanis who catalogued the collection. It was de Soldanis who saw that the collection continued to grow up till his death. I mean, you have other books, members of the order, upon whose death the books entered into the national collection. Luckily, we still have a number of the original catalogues that describe the collection as it was in the 18th century. First of all, we have the two catalogues of the two collections, of the Tencin and Portocarrero collections. They are two individual catalogues which list every book that was in the respective collection, so we can easily know how the collection actually started. In the 10 cents catalog, which is in French, there is this interesting introduction. So the 10 cent doesn't simply start listing his books, but he also writes an interesting introduction. And I took just one short paragraph here. I translated it into English, and he states, "No wise man avoids using his means against idleness, and does not seek to make them serve for his instruction, to regulate his conduct, to meet the duties of his status, and to make himself useful to society. Reading offers all these advantages." So there you are, this intellectual member of the order who built an impressive collection is now passing it over to his beloved order, advocating the other members of the order, the knights, to use their time not in idle pursuits, but to improve their intellect. The picture that I'm showing there is another document. It's quite recently found. Actually, I found this document. The origin is not in Malta. The original is in Palermo. This is a detailed account written by the first librarian, by the Soldanis, describing his work as a librarian. It is an extremely detailed and an extremely important document, because in it, the Soldanis actually describes the setting up of the collection. So the way he compiled the catalogs, essentially the Soldanis compiled two catalogs, a subject catalog and an author catalog. We still have these catalogs. They are a massive 6-volume catalogs each, so a total of 12 volumes, which list not only the books that belong to Portocarrero and to the 10 Cent, but all the books that kept entering, that kept being added up to the collection. But what the Soldanis states here in this Notizia sopra l'origine et avanzi della Bibliotheca is extremely interesting, because it gives us the insight, an 18th century insight, on the way in which a library of this size was set up, was organized, the work behind it, you know, and all of that. Right. When it comes to housing the collection, of course, we are used to the present building. However, we are talking at a time when the present building still did not exist, and the collection was housed in a different building. So between 1760 and 1812, we have a growing collection, which is housed in a sort of ramshackle building. And you always read about, at the time, complaints, even the Soldanis, complaints about this building. This building had a nickname, Il Forfantone. Forfantone relates sort of a den of thieves, sort of, and the great place where thieves go. It was where is now between Republic Street and St. Lucia Street. The building does not exist anymore. What remained of it was destroyed during the Second World War. The name, the nickname derived from its use as a gambling house. So hence Il Forfantone. Okay. Now, the Soldanis in the document I've just talked about quips that sort of look. This building in which he was working, in which he was setting up the library, there used to be, you know, they used to play cards, they used to gamble, and now playing cards made of paper thus gave way to a much improved playing, this time with learned books. You get a lot of these quips in the Soldanis' writing in this document, actually. Okay, the 10 Cent died in 1766. 10 years after, meanwhile, you have the Soldanis. The Soldanis is working in the library, setting up the collection, etc. 10 years later, Grandmaster de Rohan formally establishes the collection as a Bibliotheca Publica. So you have the order's official acceptance of the collection as a public library, open to the public, open for the knights, open for members of the order, and also open for the Maltese. So henceforth, it is a public library. All books, manuscripts belonging to deceased knights were not to be sold anymore, but were to go in the Bibliotheca. And it was the librarian's work to check whether that book was already available. If it was available, the best copy was kept, the second copy was sold, with the proceeds going to improve, to buy further books. It was quite an efficient system, which resulted in the expanding of the collection. Interestingly, you didn't just have books and manuscripts going into the collection, but also scientific instruments, artifacts, fossils, anything that was deemed of scientific value that belonged to deceased members of the order. And you had quite a lot of these, because quite a good number of knights were interested in the sciences, were interested in the natural sciences. So some of them had quite impressive collections. First and foremost, Portocarrero himself. When the collection of Portocarrero was brought over to Malta, it wasn't just books, but Portocarrero also had an impressive collection of scientific instruments, and that collection was also added to the Bibliotheca. This was really in the tradition of early modern libraries. So the library was a place of learning. It was a library and a museum. It wasn't just a library. So most national libraries in Europe originated with a dual function, as a library and as a museum. At a later point, then, you get a separation between the library aspect and the museum aspect. In the case of Malta, the Bibliotheca continued in its role of museum up till the first years of the 20th century. So as late as that, the museum collections were still housed in the library. Now we come to the actual building. Deroan not only established the Bibliotheca, but also commissioned a new building. It was well due, a new building was required. And so you have architect Stefano Ittar, of Polish origin, but who worked in Europe, worked in Sicily, to design the Bibliotheca. It was to be built in what was then known as Piazza dei Cavalieri, today, of course, Republic Square, better known as Queen Square, as a purposely built library. It is not just an old, impressive building, but it is also the first purposely built library in Malta. So not a building utilized as a library, but structured to serve the purpose of a library itself. Ittar, as I said, also designed a number of buildings in Catania and Malta. One of the survivors is Villa d'Agata and Floriana, which is attributed also to Ittar. I wanted to share with you this very interesting sketch. This comes from what is known as the Latouche album. This is held by Heritage Malta in the Musa Museum at Heritage Malta. Now, this is extremely interesting because it is one of the very, very, very few visual depictions that we have of the area where the Bibliotheca was later constructed prior to Ittar's building. So what we're seeing there is modern-day Republic Square. At center, you can see the Grand Master's Palace, now the Presidential Palace. To the left, there is the Casino Maltese building, what is now the Casino Maltese building. On the right is the old building that was the Conservatoria. The Conservatoria was a place where the goods, the silverware, the furniture, what have you, that belonged to deceased knights were deposited prior to their sale. Because when a member of the order passed away, his goods went in possession of the order. 4/5 at least of the goods went into possession of the order, including the movable stuff, the silverware. I mean, some knights were fabulously rich, so you can imagine the kind of things that they had. All that material would go to the conservatoria, it would be inventoried and eventually auctioned off. So that is the building that you're seeing there on the right. That was later to be replaced by the Bibliotheca of today. At center, actually, what you're seeing at the center, the sketch, what the sketch is really showing is the preparation of the carnival coccania. They used to put that high pole loaded with food, loaded with presents, and then on Carnival Day, the people would try to climb the coccania to see whatever they could acquire. But thanks to this coccania thing, we have the sketch of the building prior to the Bibliotheca. So the new building completed in 1796, hence what we're celebrating this year, what the central bank has decided to issue this coin, just 2 years prior to the expulsion of the order from Malta. We always say that the building of the Bibliotheca was the last building to be constructed by the order in Malta. The Order of St. John practically changed the entire island. This was their last architectural legacy to leave. It's a neoclassical building. We had moved from Baroque to neoclassical. I mean, compare a building like Castile from the 1740s to the Bibliotheca 1790s. You have the more restrained neoclassical style taking over. The building was completed, however, the books were not transferred. So up until 1812, the books remained in the old Forfantone building. Of course, as you all know, 1798, you have the arrival of the French, you have the rebellion of the Maltese against the French, so they were turbulent times indeed, and certainly the last thing on everyone's mind was actually to effect the transfer of the books from the old building to the new one. So that took quite some time. Finally, 4 June 1812, birthday of King George, the books had been transferred, and so the Bibliotheca was inaugurated, this time for its original purpose of housing the collection. We know that the collection suffered some considerable losses between 1798 and 1812, yet we are lucky that a lot from the original collection has survived. I will be referring to this at a later stage. We don't have the original, the ITAR plans of the Bibliotheca. However, we have quite an impressive collection of plans from the mid-19th to the early 20th century. Recently, these were brought to light and they were actually exhibited. They are preserved in the public works, and I want to thank the director of the public works for making them available to us. What you're seeing here is one of the earliest depictions of the new building. You can see the columns there, you can see the part of the exterior facade. Again, incidentally, it's a carnival scene again. There is the archilla going on there, and the artist captures the action, the carnival action going on in the piazza there, the square there, showing part, which practically nothing has changed from it, of the facade of the newly constructed Bibliotheca. Okay, these are some of the plans. I've just selected some examples of the plans that have recently come to light in the Public Works Department. Again, these were exhibited. There was an exhibition at the National Library, and these were exhibited there. Very impressive and very important because they enable us to trace the changes, especially on the interior, that were carried out in the Bibliotheca during the 19th and early 20th century. So, I mean, our country is amazing. The archival material that we have is amazing. We always discover a new material. One never knows, perhaps one day we also manage to come across the original designs, Ittar's designs of the Bibliotheca. Again, here we see quite a detailed. This is from the early 20th century. Quite a detailed cross-section of the different floors of the Bibliotheca. So we have these plans. These are being studied. They definitely deserve being studied, and eventually, hopefully, to have them published as well. You can see this one, Public Works Office, dated Valletta, 1931. And as I said, these are just a few. There's quite a hefty collection of these plans that have been unearthed. Right, let's pass now to the actual collection. So, like other old national libraries in Europe, our collection, as I said, originated from private collections, and the result is that the collection is very rich and varied. Strictly speaking, national libraries, strictly speaking, should collect material about the nation. So in our case, Melitensia, material about Malta. However, given the origin of our library, as in the case of many other national libraries, it also houses an important and a very impressive collection of non-Maltese material, both printed and also archival. Again, we did not have a national archive. The national archives in Malta were established in the 1980s. So prior to that, archival material was deposited in the National Library. Pride of place, two important collections, the Archive of the Order of St. John and the Archive of the Maltese Commune or Universitas. I will come to these later on. The Archive of the Order, very famous, very renowned, practically everyone has heard of it, very extensive. We have been studying this archive for over a century, yet there is still a lot of material which is untapped, which is not published, and which is crying out to be studied. We're talking well over 6,000 volumes, 6,500 volumes, with documents going back to the 12th century, the actual foundation of the order, down to 1798. So again, the Archive of the Order is not wholly about Malta. There is a lot of material about the order from pre-1530. However, of course, after 1530, you have a lot of material about Malta. That what you're seeing there is the original document, the granting of the Maltese Islands by Charles V in 1530 to the Order of St. John, one of the important documents for Malta that is part of this archive. The second important archive, I'm saying second not because it is of secondary importance, but you know, it's equally important. 700 volumes pertaining to the Maltese Universitas, the Maltese local administration. This is particularly important for the Maltese medieval period. So we have documents there starting from the late 1300s, the 1400s, that book that you're seeing there, published by the late Professor Godfrey Wettinger, a hefty volume, a huge volume, which transcribes just one of the volumes of this archive, volume 11, which contains the minutes of the Universitas from the 15th century. Extremely, extremely important, because it is one of the documents that throws light on Malta prior to 1530. It has been published thanks to massive work by Professor Wettinger, and now we have Univ 11, this volume, which is all published in one volume. Another collection, not strictly speaking an archive, but a collection of miscellaneous documents, 1,500 volumes, which the library acquired over time. Some of them going back to medieval times, a lot of them. What you're seeing here is just one of the important ones, a diary by a Maltese in Saverio Mifsud, extremely interesting 18th century diaries. There is a whole collection of these 18th century diaries highlighting daily life in Malta at the time. So this is something that you don't find in the archives, but you find in a diary. So all these different sources are important in their own rights. This is one of the manuscripts from the original Portocarrero collection. Portocarrero was particularly interested in the sciences, and he had quite a collection of these scientific manuscripts. What you're seeing here, so on the from two different manuscripts, on the left, you're seeing the old idea of the solar system. So the Earth as the center of the solar system, with the moon and the sun orbiting around the Earth. So that is the pre-Copernican view of the solar system. Whereas in the other image on the right, you get the Copernican system. The sun in the center, with the planets, the known planets at the time of the solar system, in perfect orbit around the sun. This is 18th century, so as I said, Portocarrero was interested in these, and these are fabulously important documents. Another collection known as the Codices collection. These are manuscripts. These are the older manuscripts. Most of them are medieval, most of them are on parchment, and most of them are beautifully illustrated, richly illuminated. Pride of Place is the manuscript you're seeing there, The Life of Saint Anthony Abbot, which was acquired by the Order of St. John and found itself in this collection. But even in our collection, we have these illuminated medieval manuscripts. Let's pass now to the printed collection. Pride of Place, the Melitensia, the books about Malta. Of course, the National Library has the largest collection of printed works about Malta, of printed Melitensia, going back from practically the late 1400s to date. Of course, since the 1920s, the National Library enjoys the right of legal deposit. So any book published in Malta has to be deposited in the library. A copy has to be deposited in the National Library in Malta and another in the public library in Gozo, so as to have as complete a collection as possible. The book that you're seeing there, an impressive, with that impressive typical 16th century engraved title page, is Bosio's History of the Order of St. John. Of course, essentially it is a history of the Order of St. John. However, there is a lot about Malta in this massive work. As I said, the library also houses an important, I would say very important on a European level, collection of non-Melitensia printed works. I'm showing you just one example here. And I chose this on purpose. It is in English. Now, usually we don't associate our National Library with English in the sense that the knights, the knights read in Italian, read in French, read in Spanish, but English was not well known in Malta. Even in English, however, we get some important books that found themselves in the collection during the time of the order. This certainly takes pride of place. This is the first edition of John Locke's A Letter Concerning Toleration. This is extremely rare, and we should be proud to have this book in our collection. Since I took this slide, the book has been treated, this book has been restored. Of course, you can imagine this book has been there. Malta, we have a big problem with conservation. The climate doesn't help, the humidity, the dust, whatever. It's always a fight against time to preserve these treasures, and the library does it very utmost to save these treasures for us. Other examples. The book you're seeing on the left is in French. And it is interesting because it is just one of the many books in our library that was prohibited. It was listed on the index of prohibited books. Yet, members of the Order of St. John still had these prohibited books, still read these prohibited books, and when they died, these books passed over to the National Library. In some cases, you also get the ex libris, the name of the owner. Like in this case, we have the name of the French knight who actually owned this book. In other cases, you would find the name of the previous owner blotted out or erased so that no one would know who was the owner of this prohibited book. But again, quite an interesting collection. This was a bestseller. What you're seeing here was a best-selling prohibited book. Still, it sold. Still, it was popular very often. The more you prohibit something, the more it becomes popular. And we have this book in our collection as well. To the right, an impressive multi-volumed work, the Atlas Major, a beautiful, beautiful atlas by Johannes Blau, one of the great cartographers of the time. Again, we are privileged to have this set in our collection. We also have a small but impressive collection of incunabula. Incunabula are books printed up to 1501. So really the infancy of the printed book. Again, most of these books belong to members of the order. However, some of them also belong to Maltese individuals who donated them to the National Library. So an impressive collection. What you're seeing here is actually a book related to the Knights of St. John. This is a book about the Siege of Rhodes. And what you're seeing there is just one engraving, a woodcut from this book. This is another book in the Incunabula collection. This is Ptolemy's Cosmographia, essentially a geography book. It's a large folio-sized book full of maps, including this map of the Mediterranean. Of course, at first we would have difficulty recognizing exactly what we're seeing there. However, right at the center are the Maltese Islands, Malta and Gozo, that are featured there with their names, with the temples of Juno that are marked there. This is 1490, so one of the very, very, very earliest maps, printed maps, that shows the Maltese archipelago. We have this in our library as well. So the third part of this lecture, the transition from Bibliotheca Pubblica to National Library. Now, there are a number of characteristics that marked this transition. First of all, the granting of the right of legal deposit. 1925, the library was given legal deposit rights. So by law, any work published in Malta, a copy has to be deposited in the library. This is standard practice in every national library the world over. And that's the way in which the National Library keeps for posterity the literary, the intellectual output of the nation. So, for example, our National Library holds practically the entire newspaper collection that were ever published in Malta. So that is the role of, and this becomes established in 1925. Of course, it doesn't mean that we don't have books about Malta before 1925. There is a vast collection. However, after 1925, you have a more systematic approach towards collecting Melitensia. In 1936, it was given the title of Royal Malta Library and given the coat of arms with which most of us are familiar. I am illustrating it there. So that is the bookplate designed in 1936 for the National Library. Of course, still with the Union Jack there, with still the British period. So on one side you have that ensigns coat of arms. On the other side you have the British flag surmounted with the Maltese 8-pointed cross. In the mid-1970s, we have two important developments. First of all, mid-1970s, the National Library ceases its public lending role. Some of us, I for one, still remember as a small child going to Valletta, going to the Bibliotheca to borrow books, to borrow reading books to read. Okay, I remember with delight borrowing famous 5 books, you know, that sort of children's book, which today, of course, one does not imagine to find in our National Library. That came to an end in the 1970s, in the mid-1970s, with the setting up of the Floriana Public Library. And again, this was fundamentally important because a national library should be a reference library, not a lending library. Secondly, the official renaming as National Library of Malta, following, of course, our country becoming a republic. So the official name, National Library of Malta, goes back to 1975, essentially, following the declaration of the Republic in December of the previous year. Another very important development came in 2011 when the National Library became part of something bigger, became part of Malta Libraries. So Malta Libraries now is not another government department, but it is an autonomous entity. You have the National Library, you have the Floriana Library, you have the branch libraries, the district libraries, all under the heading of Malta Libraries as an autonomous entity working in the sector. A number of projects have been embarked on, conservation projects, a vast amount of work required, digitization of the collections, the eventual online cataloging of the collection. These are massive projects which are being undertaken, which are very important, which take time, which take human resources, which take financial resources. However, they are things that need to be done, are being done, and hopefully we should be able to enjoy their results quite soon. The final part of this lecture, as I said, I would like to share with you some of the lesser known treasures, as I said, of the collection. Let's start with bindings. Again, there is an impressive collection of bindings. Many of these are from the 17th century, from the 18th century. You can see the coat of arms of the original owners very often on the books. You can imagine the intricate work. So you have leather there, gold-tooled leather, we call it. Everything done by hand. Of course, we are in the pre-machine age. All that work done by hand, the amount of detail that there is simply amazing. Interestingly, some of the ex libris of individual grandmasters. So you get the coat of arms of the grandmaster, indicating that that book originally belonged to the grandmaster. And when he died, that book also passed in the collection of the Bibliotheca. The one on the left, Grandmaster Pinto, one on the right, Grandmaster Deroan, with their coat of arms prominent on the covers, on the leather covers of the books. Something quite different again, and a reflection of the scientific and the museum aspect of the library. The first document that you're seeing there on the left was an interesting experiment. There was this knight of the Order of St. John, a Sicilian knight, Saverio Landolina Nava, who produced this document that's just a single document. It's not made of paper, it's not made of parchment, it's made of papyrus. Landolina Nava, who was from Syracuse, wanted to revive the technique of using papyrus as a writing medium. And he used papyrus from Syracuse. There's an area, Fontecciana, which produces papyrus. He created this document, and he wrote on it, and he also drew on it, sort of to prove, look, we can use papyrus as a writing medium as the Egyptians used so many centuries ago. In fact, there you can perhaps read the title, Prima esperienza del papiro siracusano. And he continues. On the back, there is a very, very detailed description of his experiment, how he managed to create this document on papyrus. The other picture shows what was known as a pneumatic machine. That was a typical 18th century machine, which proved that living things couldn't live without air. So the top part where there is that sort of roundish thing, the air was pumped away. From that area, they would put an animal, usually a mouse, there. And the moment they remove the air, they would see the mouse, and quite, you know, not a very pleasant thing. But the 18th century is precisely the age of these sort of experiments. I illustrated this machine because it was one of the machines in the original Portocarrero collections. So we had an example of this machine in our Bibliotheca. Unfortunately, the scientific collection of Portocarrero disappeared round about 1790s. We don't know exactly what happened, but it is not mentioned after the 1790s. So that is one loss that unfortunately our collection sustained. Another quite impressive and rather unusual item in our collection is this map of France, a very, very, very detailed map of France. It was a mapping project carried out in the 1780s, just before the revolution. This map is so big, you could, if you lay it on, it's made up of, you see those squares, each of those squares is an individual sheet of paper. If you were to lay the entire map on a floor, it would take quite a large room to lay out this map. Extremely detailed map of France, both physical and human. This massive project of the first really detailed mapping of France. On the other side, you see the original case, which we still have this, of course, in which these sheets, this large number of sheets are housed. And it is written there, it was donated by the King of France, Louis XVI, to Grandmaster de Rohan. So this was given, this map, we still have it, extremely rare nowadays. We still have it in our library, in our collection, this present from Louis XVI, this extensive mapping project of the Kingdom of France just before, on the eve of the French Revolution. Right, I hope this quite telegraphic tour of the library from an architectural, from a collection point of view, I hope I managed to cover at least the most important things. Of course, acknowledgements are certainly due. Central Bank, Governor, and all the stuff you've seen, Vanessa, you've seen Jasmine, so many other people involved. Also, Malta Library CEO and staff, a number of staff that were involved, and I thank them for collaborating in this presentation. Also, Director of Public Works for permission to reproduce plans, some of which I showed here. CEO and staff Heritage Malta for reproducing that very interesting image from the Latouche album. Of course, thanks very much for your patience and attention at listening to this presentation. Thanks very much.
Gosh, Profs, you've left me absolutely speechless. I have been to the Bibliotheca, but the minute we stop this recording, I'd love to get back out there. Can I just remind everybody in the audience that we're very happy to take questions. If you could either use the raise hands feature or perhaps just write down your question in the chat. And perhaps I can get the ball rolling. I'd be really interested, Prof, to find out how much we know about what was lost. You said that a number of books were lost between 1796 and 1812, and now you mentioned this numismatic machine. But do we know what else was lost?
Yes, Vanessa. Actually,
you may want, if you'd like to turn on your video. That's it. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Matthew.
Is it okay like this?
Yes, go ahead.
For example, estimates of the collection, not just estimates, because we have the actual catalogs, 18th century catalogs of the collection up till 1798. You're talking about a collection of 70 to 80,000 volumes. When the collection was transferred to the new building in 1812, the estimate was 50,000 maximum.
Gosh.
So quite some losses there. I mean, one can do an exercise. This has not been done, but one can do an exercise. One can go through the original catalogs and then check whether that item is still available in the modern catalog. And there you would be able to trace, look, this material has been lost. But again, this is something that has happened practically everywhere, more or less, especially in continental Europe. I would say we are lucky that we have what we have. And again, I want to emphasize our collection has an important European dimension to it, both with regards to the printed material and also where the archival material is concerned. For example, the Archive of the Order, we get a large amount of foreign researchers who utilize the Archive of the Order because their ancestors were knights and they have the family trees there and they have all the information. So, and I think it's important for us to also emphasize this aspect. It is our National Library, it is a collection of Melitensia, but it is almost equally so a collection of European significance. The amount of first editions of European literature that we have, I showed just one example there. There are so many others. Some of them are extremely rare. Some of them are difficult to find even in their country of origin. So coming back to the losses, I had done some research about the Portocarrero scientific collection. We know exactly what was in it because it was catalogued. Yeah. So like the books, you have microscopes, you have telescopes, you have the pneumatic machines, you have, all sorts of scientific instruments that existed in the 18th century. Interestingly, some of them are already described as precious and rare in 1760. They were made of silver, they were made of this, they were made of crystal. I mean, Portocarrero was a fabulously rich guy. This was no ordinary collection. These were, and unfortunately, one suspects that their value and their beauty attracted attention and unfortunately
from the wrong sources. Yes.
Yes.
We have a question from the librarian of the Central Bank of Malta, Manuel Kakia. Manuel, would you like to ask the question?
Yes. First of all, congratulations, Prof. Zammit.
Thank you.
Very, very interesting. I mean, I didn't even stop to have a coffee to not to lose anything. So at the first, I was a bit concerned because there was this relationship between the National Library and the Carnival. So, well, we didn't start very well on that part. But joke apart. First of all, a remark about the knights leaving the books to the National Library. In a way, it's like a rudimentary legal deposit order, because the fact that the collection started building up with all these books in a way. I mean, that's what I thought about it. My question is about the censorship. Well, we all know that the knights didn't really stick to their their custody and everything. So they must have read these books somehow. As you said, curiosity makes you read them even more.
Yes.
But forming them these censored books being part of a collection of a religious order for me is a bit, you know, who actually took decision to make these books, the censored ones, you know, part of the collection? Because that's a bit of a really, you know, a big decision for a religious order, having an inquisition with your side, you know.
Yes. Emmanuel, this is a very interesting question, actually. And in fact, I used to ask it to myself. When I started coming across all these prohibited books in the collection, I said, my goodness, this is a collection of a Catholic religious order.
Exactly.
Many of these books are prohibited by the Catholic Church. So how come they were available in the library? And it took me some time actually to actually come to a solution for this. The solution was actually provided when I discovered the document by the Soldanis. Because in his long document, the Soldanis refers to this thing of prohibited books that were coming in. I mean, you know, nice were dying. Incidentally, even Portocarrero and even the Tencent had prohibited books in their collections. So this thing started from the very start. But then the Soldanis said, look, since this is also literature, and since we don't want to lose these copies, we have decided to ask for a special permission from Rome to be able to keep these books. And that permission was actually acquired from Rome. So the books were to be kept in the library. However, not everyone could read them. There was this system, I mean, there's quite some information about this, that if you wanted to read a book that was prohibited, you would again apply to Rome. You state your reason. For example, very often you find doctors, lawyers, who apply for this permission. And the permission was given for 3 years or for 5 years. And then it either finishes or you have to reapply. So even though the prohibited books were available in the library, that does not mean that any Tom, Dick and Harry could go there and read them. You had to have permission from Rome to read these prohibited books. So that's the explanation I can give you in this respect.
Thank you very much.
Profs, we have a question in the chat now. Anne has asked, the collection keeps growing. Is there a climate-controlled annex which is taking the overspill?
As far as I know, there is. In the last years, there has been quite some investment in the conservation aspect of the collection. The problem is, I mean, the building. Okay, the building was a purposely built library. However, of course, it was built with the criteria of 250 years ago. So even though, you know, they knew their stuff, the large windows, the high ceilings, I mean, they knew what was needed for books. However, of course, it is a struggle to adapt a 250-year-old building with modern technology to enable preservation of the material. You have that issue. Of course, you also have the issue of space. Books keep entering the collection, as I said, through legal deposit, hundreds and hundreds of publications. Just imagine every day, every newspaper is deposited in the National Library, and all the periodicals, all the journals, you know, everything, and all the books. So space is obviously becoming an issue. One might perhaps start considering I don't know, a new building outside Valletta to start housing part of the collection. Of course, the historic building should remain, I think, as the National Library. However, but yes, as far as I know, there are issues that are addressing this climatic thing, but the building is what it is, unfortunately.
How very interesting. I don't know. Daniel Tulia is waving at us. Daniel, would you like to ask a question? Go ahead. You're still muted, Daniel, if you'd like to unmute your microphone.
Yeah, okay.
Nice to see you again, Daniel.
Hello again. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for organizing this. It's fantastic to stay working and hearing William doing a fantastic lecture. Thanks, William. That was fascinating, as always. We've had the chance to discuss, but something actually crept into my mind as you were talking about the library and its architecture. The ceiling was never actually painted on the inside. It's still there to its glory.
Yes.
Maybe shouldn't we open up a discussion and we do like what they do abroad and do something contemporary, even though it's an old building? I know that causes a lot of earthquakes in Malta, but it happened. I mean, you know, no, but I mean, look at Chagall's ceiling, for example, in the opera in France. Who criticizes it today? And there's so many other examples that I can stop to sort of, you know, where I live in Italy, in San Miniato, all the medieval churches have, some of them at least, not all, but some of them have actually modern frescoes of the 1950s. Well, definitely better than an empty ceiling as it is now. I don't know, was this ever discussed? Do we know what was going to go over there? Was there ever a plan? Was there ever a design? It definitely was made to be painted.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Definitely, Daniel. I have never come across any documentation relating to possible designs for the painting of the ceiling. As you rightly say, it was obviously prepared to be painted, to have some impressive painting. But up to now, we don't know. The problem is, you know, the timing of the building of the Bibliotheca. Since it came at the very end of the order's rule, I mean 1796, the structure was completed. However, usually, you know, these artworks, the paintings, etc., will come after. After came the French in Malta with all the political changes and upheavals, whatever. I'm sure that had the Bibliotheca been built a couple of decades earlier, the painting would have done, we would have more documentation. However, the timing was unfortunate in this respect. So, again, I'm not aware of any surviving designs, etc., or the mention of this in anywhere. Coming to the issue of sort of, okay, what should we do now? Shall we leave it like this? Shall we decorate it? This is the usual classical dilemma. You know, some people say, yes, perhaps it you know, so long as it harmonizes with the environment or whatever. But again, what harmonizes varies. You know, I mean, you will never get. I mean, if we take the theater's controversy, you know, some people wanted it as it was, some people like it as it is, some people wanted something completely different. So, personally, I would leave it as is, personally. I mean, even, you know, it's documenting the fact that, look, this building was actually never finished. Going into what to do, I'm afraid it would stir a hornet's nest of all. I'd rather invest more, you know, in the collection as is being done in the collection, etc.
Daniel, thank you so much for your question. I'm very, very happy to see a raised hand from Cheryl Falson at the library, because in fact I was going to say, please, someone from the library, tell us a little bit more. Cheryl, over to you.
Just an update on what William was saying.
Hi, Cheryl.
Hi, all right. The building itself was built with natural ventilation, and unfortunately, like 20 years ago, when the installation of the fire alarm system, they closed these ventilations. And way back in 2015, we started working on fumigation, which is ongoing. We opened also these ventilations again. And also we are working on acquiring more buildings that connect to the National Library through the Lens Department. We've been doing this since 2015. To date, we have no positive reply, but we have the backup of our ministry, and we're pushing to acquire more buildings that are vacant and which connect to the National Library. To say something on the reading room roof, we are currently working with the Restoration Directorate as well. We have an architect who was delegated to help us through a holistic renovation of the National Library. And we are working on continuing to restore the roof. Because as you know, it started way back, I think it was in 2012, the restoration of that ceiling was started and then it was halted. So they didn't complete the job. And now we're working on continuing that. That's just an overall update on what we're doing now.
Thanks, Cheryl.
Thanks, Cheryl, and be prepared for an onslaught of visitors, I hope, because this really has been very interesting.
I hope I didn't overdo it.
There's also a comment from Michelle Bahajar saying that there was actually a design for the ceiling, which dates back to the British period. And Sandra Dingley also said that it would be best to invest more in conservation and digitization. They should be a priority. We have time, I think, for just one more question, and that's from our photographer, our employee at the bank, Melvin Bujaya, who took the lovely shot of the Bibliotheca, which we used on Facebook. Melvin, over to you.
Thanks very much. You're boasting me too much. Professor Zammit, many thanks for excellent delivery of the lecture. I was going to ask you something. If there is something that the pandemic has taught us this last year and a half, was that we had to be proactive. A lot of museums around the world were closed due to the pandemic. However, those who were proactive in digitalization managed to still exhibit their exhibitions and their artifacts and whatever. Is it time here in Malta that the Bibliotheca digitize its artifacts, knowing that even more that foreign countries also can be informed with their material that we have over here?
Listen, I can answer you. Perhaps then Cheryl can take over. One of the great projects done in this respect, and which is of great use. I mean, practically every time you go to the Bibliotheca, you see people using, is the microfilming of the newspaper collection. Now, why is it so important? Newspapers are among the most fragile of printed works because in the case of Malta, they're almost 100% 19th and 20th century, with very, very, very common type of paper being used, and that paper deteriorates greatly. So handling the newspapers is, one of the worst things you can do. And I think it was a right move to prioritize in that area. So in that area, we have certainly moved. As far as I know, there has also been digitization of some of the more important illuminated manuscripts and what have you. But Cheryl, I'll pass over this to you.
Yes, we do have digitized material which is available online, and we are currently working on a project to outsource also the digitization and the compilation of the metadata. So we're working on that. Also, during the pandemic, we didn't stop there. We didn't close our doors. Actually, our public lectures were moved online. They were recorded and we reached more visitors. So we didn't only target those researchers which usually visit the National Library, but we targeted also the general public, which was quite a positive return for us. And from that, we're thinking of even our outreach activities going hybrid rather than just hosting public lectures that people can just come and see it on that day. actually, if we record it, we can reach out to more people.
Many thanks.
Prosit. I'm afraid we have pretty much run out of time. I thought this would be so interesting that we would run over, which is a fantastic sign. Many thanks to all of you, especially to Prof. William Zammit for taking part, the IT department and communications department at the bank for helping to put all of this together. We're always worried that something will go wrong, and it's fantastic it went so smoothly. The recording will be available online, and we will be notifying people on social media as well. We'll also try to add the link to our social media. Do follow us on Facebook events or via our website. You can register to be told whenever there are similar public lectures coming up. They're not all about economics. We feel that we have a much more broad remit than just monetary policy, and we take our responsibility very seriously. Many thanks to Jesgat for including this very, very interesting coin, and of course to everybody in the currency department, numismatics department, who is working on the coin. We're really looking forward to the Heroes of the Pandemic one, which will be also something I think that will touch all our hearts. Thank you very much, and I wish you all the remainder of a very good week. On behalf of the Central Bank, thank you for joining us.